Thierry Imagine, a very good morning to you. It is Sunday the 12th of May and you are waking up with Ireland AM. Lucky you. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, coming up, Ireland's best result in 24 years. It was a night of drama in Malmo, and we look back on some of the highlights, including the moment Bambi Thug crowned the winner.
Yes.
Literally.
Yes.
Space Act Nemo got the crown.
The crown from the witch.
From the witch.
If you know, you know.
You're in the gang. You're in the gang.
Now, the housing crisis could be about to get even worse, and that's according to a report in today's Business Post that says the government could need to build as many as 80,000 houses every year for the next 25 years. We'll have more from today's papers in 20 minutes' time.
In sport, Cork defy the odds and Carlow cause a shock. It was all happening in the hurling yesterday. We'll be chatting about those matches and the rest of this weekend's sporting action later this hour.
Plus, 50 years on from the 1974 bombings in Dublin and Monaghan, we'll be hearing about a new feature documentary to remember the tragedy.
And he's due to play to 250,000 people in Ireland this week. We hear from 3 mega fans about why Bruce Springsteen truly is the boss for Irish audiences.
Shiva, what's going on over there?
Yes, speaking of the boss, here I am. Good morning. Have you heard of paper marbling? But if you haven't, we're about to get a lesson from Natalia Dragonova. What are you going to be showing us today, Natalia?
Today I will introduce you to marbling art. I will splash paints on the surface of water and we will produce such papers like this.
OK, and me and Gráinne will have to live up to something like that. Should be easy. What do you think, Grá?
Absolutely.
They'll be wearing the paint. There'll be more paint on them than there will be on the paper.
Yeah. I'll be looking for wipes later.
You need to be chilled to handle Irish weather. That's why Chill sponsor weather updates on Virgin Media One.
This afternoon, we can expect any patches of mist or fog to clear early, leaving just sunny skies and a few scattered showers across the country, with temperatures running from 14 to 19 degrees. This evening, we'll see heavy downpours and even thunderstorms developing in some areas, with a chance for spot flooding in places. Temperatures will range between 13 and 19 degrees. And tonight, we'll see persistent rain in the southwest through to midnight, before extending north over much of Munster, Connacht and South Leinster. Temperatures are expected to range from 11 to 12 degrees.
You need to be chilled to handle Irish weather. That's why Chill sponsor weather updates on Virgin Media One.
Let's take a check now in your morning papers, starting with the Sunday Independent, which leads with the headline, Migrant Welfare Review as Harris vows to get firm. The paper reports that a major review of welfare supports and housing entitlements offered to asylum seekers is being undertaken by the government.
On the front page of the Business Post is the headline, up to 80,000 new homes a year needed between now and 2050. The paper writes that a new landmark report from the Housing Commission has warned Housing Minister Darragh O'Brien of this figure after just over 32,000 new homes were built in the state last year.
The Sunday Times leads with the headline, Critical Risks in Public Health warns top medic. The paper writes that the state's Chief Medical Officer, Breda Smith, had privately warned the government that her office was, quote, functioning at high risks 3 months before she resigned in an email last November.
On to the tabloids, and the Irish Mail on Sunday leads with RTE invoices lost in move worth €400,000. The paper states that RTE could not produce invoices for €400,000 of transaction from when key executives who refused to cooperate with the controversial Barter account probe were in charge.
Over to the Sunday World, which goes with the headline, Kinahan link to Josh hit rifle. The paper reports that a gangland thug suspected in an accidental shooting may have acquired the murder weapon through criminal associates of the Kinahan cartel.
The front page of The Sun on Sunday writes, Stalker Stokes free. The paper writes that former Irish striker Anthony Stokes has been released from prison on a stalking rap just halfway through his 5-month sentence.
And finally, the Sunday Mirror reads, Bambi's Euro heartache. The paper writes that Bambi Thug fell short of winning the Eurovision Song Contest for Ireland last night, coming in 6th place with 278 points, Ireland's best result in 24 years.
Yeah, it really was our best Eurovision result in 6 years. And what a performance from Bambi Thug.
Yeah.
Memorable.
The opening shot when they did this and the candles went on.
Yeah.
I thought it was...
As a piece of performance art, I think it was the most memorable of the night, for sure.
Yeah, but isn't that what Eurovision has become? It's become performance art.
That's what it has
It's not
become.
a singer and a song.
No.
Yeah, well, no, it's the whole production.
Yeah.
But it is. It's a whole, like, what is it? 20-odd productions in
Yes.
one big show.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you could see the work that went in.
Oh, absolutely. Incredibly arresting to look at, definitely.
It was brilliant. And the Australians loved us.
Yes, I know, 12 points from Australia.
Yes.
And what did you think of the hashtag Crown the Witch? I think that was a very clever touch to have that attached to the performance.
No,
it was
absolutely.
trending, you know?
Yeah, it was
like,
trending, yeah.
For I think it was about 20 seconds, Ireland were actually leading.
Really?
And
Yeah,
then the
we were,
first 12
yeah.
points came in for Switzerland.
Yeah.
And it was, there we go.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
That
That's
was
it.
I did enjoy that song.
It was very special, the connection between Nemo from
And
Switzerland and Bambi,
Bambi
Thug.
Thug.
I know they said they were in constant contact because they were both non-binary artists, and Nemo said that it meant a lot that they weren't the only non-binary artists in the competition. So I think that was lovely.
Do you know what got my attention, though? And we were... It's gas.
Finland.
He had no gear on him. Nothing on him. And then eventually put a pair of shorts on him that were still not big enough to house
do the
everything.
job. Yeah.
Martin was trying to show us his video. It's like, we don't need to see it.
When they were handing out the 12 points, in some instances, say, for example, the Greeks, before they announced that they'd given 12 points to Switzerland, the Greek singer was over with Nemo to congratulate him.
Yeah, I saw
And that
that.
happened 2 or 3 times, and I went, somebody's getting a heads up here.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Were the announcements slightly earlier? I don't know. Yeah, that's a bit odd, isn't it?
It was just a little bit odd.
Yeah, and what did you think of the points then? So we gave nothing. Ireland gave nothing to the UK, as we are wont to do, aren't we?
But we weren't the only country to give the UK nothing.
Yeah,
Where did the UK finish? Do we know? They weren't last.
They weren't last. It was fairly respectable in the end.
Yeah.
They were
18th.
18th. Okay,
We had inspiration, both of us together.
I just remembered.
It was, listen, Ollie Alexander, what a great singer he is.
Great singer,
but
Really good actor too.
Don't think that was his best
No.
ever. I don't think he'll look back on that and say that was my best ever vocal.
Really?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, goodness, I'll have to. I didn't know. I did not watch the Eurovision last night. I didn't want to.
But if it was a jury vote, which is what Eurovision used to be, Switzerland were winners by a landslide.
Absolutely. But
Then it
speaking of jury votes and then public votes.
Public votes. What happens?
What happened?
Like Israel went from nowhere to first.
Yeah.
But Ireland supposedly, allegedly, gave Israel 10 points. Is that representative of the Irish public?
I don't believe
wouldn't have thought so whatsoever.
Yeah, but there were a lot of questions on Twitter about those votes.
There were, and also the fact that there was a lot of people boycotting the Eurovision.
Yes.
So the people who were watching, maybe, I don't know, the people who wouldn't have given Israel 10 votes weren't watching, weren't voting. Was that the discrepancy?
People were asked not to watch, but to vote.
I saw that, yeah. Don't watch, but do vote.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tricky.
I know,
Yeah.
really, really tricky. But in the end, I think the
right song won.
Yeah, although the Croat song was pretty good too.
Which one?
The Croatian song.
Oh, the Croatian song. Yes,
Yeah.
it was.
It was
yes, it
pretty
was.
good as well. So
Yeah.
look, Switzerland win it. They
Yes.
deserve to win it. They got crowned by the witch.
Yeah.
They got
They got to
crowned
bring
by
their
the
crown
witch.
onto the stage.
Yes.
Happy days.
And you see, actually, they broke the trophy. Switzerland broke the
What?
trophy. They were like celebrating. They kind of knelt down and went like this, and the trophy smashed on the stage.
No.
Ouch.
Yeah, like
Ouch.
Mean Girls. They were giving a bit to everyone in the audience.
Anyway, your thoughts on Eurovision, please.
Yes.
Get to us at 089 611 111.
Coming up, we get under the covers of this morning's papers. We'll see you after the break.
You're very welcome back. Now it's bad news for Simon Harris and his housing plan today. News editor with Bauer Media, Laura Donnelly, and journalist with Sunday Business Post, Ian Guider, is with us now. Yeah, it's not exactly news in the sense that it's a surprise that we don't have enough housing, and we won't have enough housing. But this report has been a long time coming to tell us that, Ian.
Yes, the Business Post today has some of the details that are coming in the Housing Commission's report. This commission was actually launched by Darragh O'Brien. I think it's at least 3 to 4 years ago, and we're only getting to the point where the report is going to the Cabinet in the next couple of weeks. And some of the details that have leaked out of it suggest that, yes, we all know we need to build more houses across the country. How many? Well, it will depend on how fast the population is growing and how house households are formed because people aren't getting married as young as they used to be, so we have more people living alone. But we could need, if the population goes from where it is right now at about 5.3 million, by the end of 2050s, we could have 7 million people in the country. And at that point, we could need to build...
Could it really grow that
quickly? Yeah, it has already expanded so much. You've got more... We had a big baby boom in the last couple of decades and more people emigrating here, working here. So it could go to 7 million. And if that does happen, we could need to build 80,000 homes per year. Even if the population doesn't get above 7 million, you could still need to build 70,000 homes per year. What are we doing right now? 30,000 homes per year. We are so far behind on the existing targets, and now we're going to have new targets coming in this report whenever it is published. And you've got to ask the question, if we're struggling right now to build the homes people need, how on earth are we going to reach 70 or 80,000 in decades ahead?
Laura, I mean, Simon Harris stood up last month when he became Taoiseach and said, we needed 250,000 homes by 2030. It was actually an underestimate. It's already out of date, that. And that was a target that people felt that's not achievable.
Yeah, absolutely. The figures Ian has just mentioned are the upper end. So 80,000 is the max according to the Housing Commission, but just over 32,000 were built last year. And I don't know, from covering stories like that, that felt like it was hard won to get those 32,000 built. Like, we got those built and people were still crying out for more. I know friends who can't get places to buy or rent. If you talk to any political representatives, they'll talk about the amount of people on housing waiting lists. So 32,000 is all we managed last year. I don't know how on earth we'll get to 80,000 if we ever need that. Like, do we have the people to build them?
Well, that's what it feels like, because a lot of those very talented tradesmen left and they went to the other side of the world and they haven't been brought back, it feels like.
And how could they come here? Because they have no accommodation for people who we want to come in and build homes out there. And we need we need houses, we need apartments, we need student accommodation.
Yes.
We need all of these different things, and we just don't have the people to build it, or even the capacity. Where are the big building firms? Lots of them went bust after the Celtic Tiger, so we don't even have the people, we don't have the companies or the people to build. All of this is a problem. And when the Housing Commission's report is finally published, they'll be great, we've got a plan, but how are we going to implement it? It's great having the report, acting on it, and acting on it quickly is going to be the big problem.
Let's move on now to the Sunday Independent and the Migrant Welfare Review. And it says here that Ireland is being referred to as a soft spot for migrants due to generous welfare entitlements and easy access to employment. Is that correct? Is that fair? Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, it has been described as generous. €38 a week for an adult, just over €38 a week, and just over €29 for a child is being described as generous for people for fleeing here from... They're leaving atrocious situations and they're coming here and they're potentially being housed in tents for a very short space of time before being moved to more tents. So Simon Harris is looking into this and he said he'll review it, and when he does review it, he will make some changes very quickly. There's also a call for the fact that medical cards are given to be reviewed, but apparently that aspect of it won't be reviewed. It'll be the amount that's being distributed to the asylum seekers when they arrive here.
How much overall spend from welfare here does this represent? Because I kind of feel like people don't have enough information to make decisions on this. There's a lot of muttering online about the money that is being spent on people who are coming into the country in dire straits. You've just said it.
Yeah, Laura's...
But what does it represent, really?
It's a small amount of money. Laura's right. People are not coming here to claim social welfare benefits. They're coming here to flee war zones and other atrocities. The amount of money we spend, €38 per week, that's a fraction of what people get on the normal social welfare benefits. But also, we spend as a country the best part of €20 billion on social welfare and pensions and medical cards. We are probably spending at most a couple of €100 million per year on the entire asylum system, social welfare payments, people in direct provision, people getting medical cards. That is not a huge amount of money. And we have seen the reduction from people coming from Ukraine who are getting the full social welfare rates and medical cards. That for new people is coming down when they come here. So the amount of money will be reduced. But I don't think this is the big problem with the accommodation. Accommodation is the big issue for asylum seekers, not the welfare rate.
Why isn't that message being communicated a little bit better? Because I feel that people are very frustrated and they feel that, you know, people are coming in and just taking money from others, and it's allowing this far-right sort of agenda to move on. But a bit better communication could possibly solve a lot of this, Laura.
It could potentially be a good idea to communicate it a bit better, but also the people who are worked up about this, I don't know if you'll reach them, and I don't know if they'll care that the amount of money is being reduced, potentially. I don't think that will change their mind. I think they'll still be worked up. I think they'll still be out with their banners and their flags and their protests, I imagine. I don't think a small reduction in the amount of money that is given to asylum seekers fleeing will change their tune. This exercise could work slightly, or it could be optics. We don't know. But it's certainly something worth looking into. But I think you're right in terms of the communication. Put the message out in a better way rather than maybe taking away from the people who are in extreme situations.
Indeed.
It's easy to tackle this issue about welfare rates rather than the underlying issue is we don't have accommodation for people. We're again in the Sunday Independent saying that even the military-style tents that we have up in Crooksling and everywhere else, they're running out of them. So the new people arriving will be just happen to be getting the tents that we've taken away from along the canal and elsewhere.
It's frightening, and it's not getting better, and it all seems to be coming back to housing again. Let's look at something completely different. The Eurovision last night, spectacular, held in Malmo, Sweden, equalling Ireland's record for wins. An amazing production. Bambi Thug did better than, I suppose, a lot of people expected, and it was our best finish for many, many years.
Yes, all of that happened, but there's still just so much controversy. So brilliant performance to get to the final. We haven't got to the final in years. Came out of it in 6th place, better than we've done in over 20 years. But the main things that people are still talking about is everything that's happened in the run-up to this. So Bambi Thug didn't do their rehearsal yesterday because of what's said to be an incident, and we don't really know exactly what happened. There are claims that it relates to Israel's commentary of Bambi's performance, but that hasn't been confirmed yet, and Bambi herself saying it hasn't been resolved. There's also the Netherlands issue. Their performer didn't perform in the final, again for a backstage issue believed to relate to a camera person, but we don't know the details of that. Then there's all the booing when the performance was on. It was a spectacle, but for various other reasons other than its usual Eurovision. And
then after the national jury votes were given, in came the public vote, and Israel came from quite low down to leapfrog everybody to lead the competition at one point and looking possibly like a winner.
And it's going to raise questions among a lot of people. How did that happen? You can't not vote. You can only get points by voting for somebody. If people were boycotting the Eurovision, well, then those that did vote would have a greater influence. So that might have been the thing. But it is, the politics has overshadowed the entire week of the Eurovision.
Indeed.
And overshadowing, I didn't watch all of it last night. I caught a bit of it when I came in. It was a great performance. The winner, fantastic, but also Bambi Thug has done fantastic. We have had our best performance in the Eurovision in so long, and that should be the template for the future. Get an artist who is not just a singer, get somebody who can put on a great performance, who does a spectacular show, and that's the formula for future years when the Eurovision won't be so controversial, hopefully.
Yes, but it's been controversial for the last number of years now, between Russia and Belarus being ruled out, but Israel being allowed to compete. And it's almost impossible. I mean, I think the tagline on the stage last night was "United by Music," but it was anything but united, really, last night. There was so much tension in the air.
Yeah, and you always hear these comments that it's not political and they don't get involved and stuff like that. It's just music, but it's been anything but. And a lot of the performers ended their performances by throwing in a phrase or a comment about peace and stuff like that. And then even one of the jury reps from one of the other countries came on and sort of had a little spiel before they announced their vote, saying we want equality and we want peace and things like that. So you can't get away from the fact that it's overshadowed.
So it's going to Switzerland. The picture of neutrality next year. Let's see what happens. Thank you so much, Ian and Laura, for coming in to talk to us this morning. Coming up, we'll be looking back at a thrilling day of hurling. Sports coming up next.
You're very welcome back. If you're looking for a new hobby, we may have found something that would help give you an outlet to your inner artist.
Yes, indeed. Paper marbling is a beautiful method where patterns similar to smooth marble are transferred to paper or fabric. Paper marbling teacher Natalia Dragonova is here to show us how it's done. You are so welcoming. What is paper marbling?
Actually, paper marbling, this is some art. Then when we splash some paints on the water, and after we can print on paper. It's just some special preparation for paints that can work like this on water. That's why we can print.
Yeah. And what's the history around it?
Yeah, this is an old history for this art because it's 16th century, so it's really old. And historically, they used for books. So this is for covering.
I have seen those on
and
old
this
books.
is on paper. So you can just find it in some bookshops, in old stores. So this is we can produce same today.
Okay. Beautiful. Well, let's see.
We will see if we can do.
Okay, so we have a go.
Let's do it.
So what do we got first?
So firstly, this is not just water from the tap. I need to prepare it, and this is, you see, it's little like jelly.
It's very thick, viscous.
Yes, because this is carrageen moss. This is seaweed.
Oh, seaweed, moss, water.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you make that?
Yeah, it's just like powder. I have it and dissolved in water, and after I have this transparent water, and it's little jelly.
Yeah.
And this, because of that, paints can be on the top of the water.
It'll stay on top.
That's why it's flowing, and that's why it's like we can work with this water.
So once you have your water in.
Yeah. Firstly, we need to clean it with paper.
So we need to clean the top of the water, even though there's nothing on it?
It's clean, but it's transparent. But still, there is some dust or some maybe some skim on water.
Okay. So we allow the paper to
just
touch
don't afraid. Yeah.
Oh God. Okay. Sorry, I am a little bit afraid. Okay. Oh God, it's very.
Okay.
It feels spongy.
Yeah. Fun.
Okay, and then pull it away.
Slide it off.
Yeah, and we just on the border. Yeah, take like this. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Here we go.
And we just.
And okay.
Yeah, we use it. Right. We don't need it.
Clean. We have prepared it.
Okay.
Oh, better to use.
Better use our gloves.
to protect
always.
That's a good idea.
Need to protect the hands. We already have our aprons on.
Yeah, it's natural colors, but it's better to use. I mean, just to be clean, like in kitchen.
Of course.
Yeah.
So the paints we use, are they a special type of paint?
Yeah, it's special. It's not gouache. It's not watercolors.
Okay.
It's special prepared, and there is some adding that let colors expanding, flowing on water.
Okay.
So historically it was ox gall, but now I use just some synthetical or something for expanding.
Okay.
It's like for wash, for dishwash,
Okay.
We better get on with it because we will run out of time and we won't have done any marbling.
Yeah. So I will splash the colors like this.
Okay.
Yeah, and you use as well.
So we squeeze it out
Squeeze
first.
little bit and just little touching and splashing on the water.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Thank
It's
goodness I
starting
have
to
an
be
apron on.
magic.
Now.
Yeah. And
Okay.
now you just change your
Colour.
color.
Oh my God, mine is accidentally Ireland now
Yeah.
with this colour.
And splash as well. It's interesting that these brushes, they're just from horse hair.
Horsehair.
Yes,
Okay.
it's traditionally for Turkish art. And as you know, this marbling, this is in Europe known like marbling art, but in Turkey, this is like Ebru.
Ebru, that's the type in Turkey.
Yeah, this is traditional Turkish art. And also, it's interesting that I think it's enough for you. Yeah.
Very
Because
polite
it's
way.
Very polite, Natalia.
Yeah, now you can play with the stick and create some pattern. Yeah, you're just great, yeah.
And see, now I understand it's my first time ever doing
Yeah.
it, so I don't think I'd be a master. But is there a way to create a specific pattern or a picture?
Yeah, you can create because this water you can control. You can, because of this jelly consistency, you can create some patterns like this. Or you can create like this.
Okay, so they're only white jeans. It's fine. It's only white jeans.
So this is, you can do.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
So what do I do with this instrument?
Yeah, you just play with water.
Like that?
Yeah, like this and create
Okay.
some. Yeah, and...
Oh, cool. Okay, so now we're going to...
Yeah, now you will do like this, okay?
Beautiful.
Yeah, do.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Ooh.
Just straight line, yeah,
Beautiful.
like this.
Yeah, love it.
And for you, we will add something more.
Okay,
Yeah.
give it a bit of something
Yeah.
extra.
This is beautiful. This looks like paisley or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
and you will use some special comb now.
Okay, so what's this?
You
it's a comb.
Yeah, it's special comb, and you just
pull it through
and come to you.
Do you know what? I think I've seen this. Yeah, look at that.
That's gorgeous.
You'd wear that.
And I will create my pattern.
Shiva, that's beautiful.
It's like Moschino.
Yeah.
Moschino wishes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
you're going to go in with the comb as well. Oh, look, here's a little fine comb.
yeah, and I use just some special
beautiful.
one. Yeah.
Okay.
And now I will use this. Yeah, you can
go on,
just
Grania, get creative there.
Yeah. And I will do like some movements. This is traditional for Europe and for Turkey as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
so this is some
yours is like a peacock. I feel.
Yeah, it's like peacock. You know this. Yeah. And it's funny. You have same colors that you have.
Yes, it's not just. Okay, so now what's the next step then? We need to transfer this onto the
we
paper.
need to transfer. Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I would like to say that something about the brew. You remember?
Yeah, go on.
So you only not create only the patterns. You create
could
even
actually,
Wow.
This is
stunning.
you can done on water.
Yeah.
So it's not after.
Okay, we have a minute left.
Yeah. So we will print. And this is the paper.
And I'm guessing, is this normal paper or is this special
it's
paper?
Normal.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's normal paper because paper can absorb. So we just put on water like this.
Oh, okay, so
just don't be fast and don't be slow. Just use this.
Don't be fast, don't be slow.
Yeah.
Be perfect.
Put like this.
All right, okay.
And
big reveal, guys.
Okay.
Are we ready? Okay, okay.
Yeah, put on border like me.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And then pull towards us.
Yeah, and just on border.
On border, yes.
Yeah, just scrape
like
it off.
This. And we have it.
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, guys.
Shiva, it is beautiful.
It is nice, isn't it?
It's really lovely.
Yeah. So look at mine.
I actually feel like it looks like those beautiful scars from the 60s.
Yes, but is that what they use? Probably. It is marbling, isn't it?
possibly.
Now, you did it before, Natalia. Yours is a little bit better than ours. That is
Natalia,
absolutely wonderful.
thank
Natalia,
you.
thank you so much. That was so much fun.
It really, really was.
To find out more about Natalia's Ebru and paper marbling classes, visit libertiespapers.ie.
Still to come, 50 years on, we'll be remembering the Dublin and Monaghan bombings of 1974. Plus, we'll be sitting down with some of Bruce Springsteen's biggest fans ahead of his Irish show. So we'll see you in a few. Bailo Yeriadish, it's coming up on 10 o'clock and you are watching the second hour of Sunday's Ireland AM.
Still to come, 50 years on from the Dublin Monaghan bombings, we'll be speaking to two people who have personal experience with the Troubles.
Plus, he's played up to 1 million fans in Ireland. But why is Bruce such an icon here? 3 mega fans are going to be telling us all about the boss.
And we chat to ex-convict Gerard Redmond on how the power of sport turned his life around. That's after 11.
Shiva is in the kitchen and I am jealous. I don't mind saying it.
Yes, well, you should be, Grania. Good morning. It's the sweet treat that's taken TikTok by storm by asking the question, is it really possible to have too much sugar? And Karina Camerino, what do you reckon? Is it too possible? Is it possible?
I did some really tough homework, which was researching TikTok videos on how to make the viral crookie. It's a croissant stuffed with cookie.
Right. Interesting.
I think you're going to taste it and you're going to love it.
You think you're going to like it?
I don't have any doubt that you're going to like it. What's not to like? Cookie croissant.
Okay, what do you think, guys? Do you reckon you like it?
Oh, sign me up.
I'm in. God gave me 2 hands.
He certainly did, Martin. We're going to leave that now.
I need 1 for each. Thank you very much.
Okay.
You need to be chilled to handle Irish weather. That's why Chill sponsor weather updates on Virgin Media One.
This afternoon, we can expect any patches of mist or fog to clear early, leaving just sunny skies and a few scattered showers across the country, with temperatures running from 14 to 19 degrees. This evening, we'll see heavy downpours and even thunderstorms developing in some areas, with a chance for spot flooding in places. Temperatures will range between 13 and 19 degrees. And tonight, we'll see persistent rain in the southwest through to midnight, before extending north over much of Munster, Connacht and South Leinster. Temperatures are expected to range from 11 to 12 degrees.
You need to be chilled to handle Irish weather. That's why Chill sponsor weather updates on Virgin Media One.
Let's have a look at your morning papers, starting with the Sunday Independent, which leads with the headline, Migrant Welfare Review as Harris vows to get firm. The paper reports that a major review of welfare support and housing entitlements offered to asylum seekers is being undertaken by the government.
Front page of the Business Post carries the headline, up to 80,000 new homes a year needed between now and 2050. The paper writes that the Housing Commission has warned Housing Minister Darragh O'Brien of this figure, after just over 32,000 new homes were built in the state last year.
The Sunday Times leads with the headline, Critical Risks in Public Health warns top medic. The paper writes that the state's Chief Medical Officer, Breda Smith, had privately warned the government that her office was, quote, functioning at high risks 3 months before she resigned in an email last November.
Onto the tabloids, and the Irish Mail on Sunday leads with RTE invoices lost in move worth €400,000. The paper states that RTE could not produce invoices for €400,000 of transactions from when key executives who refused to cooperate with a controversial barter account probe were in charge.
Over to the Sunday World, which goes with the headline, Kinahan link to Josh hit rifle. The paper reports that a gangland thug suspected in an accidental shooting may have acquired the murder weapon through criminal associates of the Kinahan cartel.
Front page of the Sun on Sunday writes, Stalker Stokes free. The paper writes that former Irish striker Anthony Stokes has been released from prison on a stalking rap just halfway through his 5-month sentence.
And finally, the Sunday Mirror reads, Bambi's Euro heartache. The paper writes that Bambi Thug fell short of winning the Eurovision Song Contest for Ireland last night, coming in 6th place with 278 points. That is Ireland's best result in 24 years.
All right, well, COVID times gave us a few different things, right? And one of the things that it gave us, apart from remote working, was the new term, quiet quitting. Yeah. So this became kind of viral about 2 years ago.
Yeah, a bit of a TikTok millennial kind of Gen Z term.
Where you literally just go in, do the work, nothing extra, go home. All right?
Right.
So people think, yeah, I'm paid to work from this time to this time. That's all I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I'm taking me breaks here, here, and here. I feel as if I'm going to become a trade union spokesman.
I feel like you're getting into it. Exactly. Now, what's the difference between that and working to rule?
Working to rule. Now, quiet quitting. We have vetoed our members. And we spoke to them about this. But yeah, it's literally that.
Yeah.
That you would do. And anyway.
I feel that Irish people would be all over this, and we didn't need quiet quitting. We didn't need a label put on it.
It might have been there already.
Oh, yeah. It was so quiet, we were doing it without even calling it anything.
Yeah. It's very just like laying down boundaries, though, isn't it? Like, and that's a very Gen Z, that kind of age thing to do, where they're like, no, I recognise what is to do with me and what is not to do with me, and this is all I'm doing, and this is my boundary, and I'm protecting my peace.
Okay,
Natural trade unionism.
Yeah.
But in some instances, they're saying that people are coming in and they are doing their work and they're coming in at this time and they're leaving at that time. But in some cases, as research has been carried out, people are just arriving to work and leaving without being very productive.
Well, that's not quiet quitting, is it? That's
just not working.
Incompetence, yeah.
Anyway, they reckon...
Dossing, yes.
The research that's been carried out estimates that the cost of quiet quitting disengagement has lowered the return on annual wage costs by 4%. So it means that quiet quitting was defined as fulfilling job requirements, but no more. But they're saying that the research has just said that people might as well leave. Because it's costing as much.
Yeah, and you're not contributing to it. I really don't like this, because I understand in some work environments they can really take advantage of people and give them too much to do. But I think there's a kind of almost a social contract in a work environment as well, where everyone has to pull their weight. You kind of give and take. You help people out here and there. Obviously, there's a line, and you can't be working till midnight every night. But I think you need to be a little bit flexible with this, and respect the people in your workplace.
I agree with you, and I think morale must be really low if you're at that crack.
Yeah, it must be. But of course, this research is saying now that it's up to the employers to incentivise the people to do their work.
True, yeah.
To a point.
Pay the workers.
Pay the workers.
But also give them nice meals and nights out and be like, we value you.
Oh, OK, I'll sign up for that.
Yeah. Anyway, what I'm saying is pull your weight, guys, all right? Pull your weight. There's a social contract here.
Oh, so was you that put this in here?
Yeah, this is you.
This is your idea.
That's more of it now.
The plan.
Okay. OK, Shiva may be doing the rest of her show on her own.
Yeah, because we don't have to do this.
They're quietly quitting.
Anyway, we'd love your thoughts on it. Let us know at 0896 111 111. Coming up, we're remembering the Dublin Monaghan bombings 50 years on. Stay with us. Welcome back. On the 17th of May 1974, 3 no-warning car bombs detonated in Dublin city centre within 3 minutes of each other, killing 27 people.
Later that evening, a no-warning car bomb in Monaghan town killed 7 more innocent people. In total, 34 people died that summer's day.
We're joined this morning by 2 people who have personal experiences with the bombings, Bernie McNally and Monica Duffy. And we're also joined by Fergus Dowd, who has produced a new film to mark the 50th anniversary of the Dublin Monaghan bombings. You're welcome to the show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Bernie, we'll start with you. So tell us your story. You were 15.
No, I was 16.
16.
I just turned 16, yeah. And I worked in O'Neill's shoe shop on Talbot Street.
Right.
In a rush to get out to the weekend to meet my friends and go for a gallivant. And came up to 5:30. I was rushing down the stairs to get a pair of shoes in the storeroom for a late night customer. Well, the shop stayed up until 6, so that's what we mean late night. So I ran down. On the way down, I heard the first bomb explode in Parnell Street. But I suppose it stopped me in my tracks, but I didn't understand the devastation a bomb would cause or the death it would cause.
Was it very loud? Like when you remember it, was there a vibration? Did it shake?
Not at that.
Just the sound.
Not that I can remember vibration, but I remember I was halfway down off the ground floor.
Okay.
So I just ran into the storeroom, got the shoes and ran back up. And as I came up onto the landing, which was the road floor, you know, the level with the road, there was a big Georgian door between the shops that people used to live upstairs would use. So May McKenna lived upstairs. And when she heard the bomb go off, she had ran downstairs and she opened the door and Mr. O'Neill was telling her to close it because he had noticed a car outside with a Northern registration on it. And she said to me, "Did you hear a bomb going off?" I said, "Yeah, I think it was a bomb." But as I stepped away from her, I stepped into the shop, there was a big flash in the sky. So I just thought, well, maybe it was like thunder and lightning. Just for a split second, I thought that, and then the blast hit me.
Wow. Okay.
So
it left you with a permanent injury.
Yes, I had. I lost my right eye as a result of it, and then I had other superficial wounds in my head and my hip and that. But it was my eye was, I suppose, superseded the other injuries I had, and then I lost that when I was 40. So,
Monica, your husband Tommy was killed. Can you tell us about that?
I was 18 at the time. Tom was about 18 at the time, and he was a bus conductor in CAE. And on the night of the 1st of December in 1972, there was a warning for that was a bomb explosion to go off, a bomb to go off, and himself and another man, George Bradshaw, ran out of the canteen and ran straight into it, and they were killed instantly. On the same night, at the same time at Liberty Hall, another bomb went off at the same time, and there was a lot of people injured in that bomb.
Monica, you were so young, probably newly married. You were pregnant at the time as well.
I was expecting my second child at the time, yeah.
What an incredible trauma to go through.
It was really a blank, you know, when it happened. That's too enormous of a situation for you to deal with, and it's like as if you're sort of removed from it for years, really. Okay, yeah, it was very, very difficult because then you realise you had the sole responsibility to bring up a little girl, which I had, and then my unborn child, and the realisation that, you know, these children would never experience their dad, you know, and it was horrific. And about 6 weeks later, in the same place. Another bomb went off and another busman was killed in the very same place.
This was Sackville Place.
Sackville Place, yeah.
Just the road that links O'Connell Street.
Yeah, just going up the Clearys there.
Yeah,
what used to be Clearys,
Tell us about the Justice for the Forgotten, Bernie.
Well, I think Justice for the Forgotten began in 1993 and then it collapsed again. And then Margaret Irwin got involved in it in 1996 and a legal team. And that's where the name came from. The legal team came up with the name for it. So from 1996, we were I wasn't involved in it then. I didn't get involved in it till 1999. 1998, I had my eye removed. And then a friend rang me to tell me there was an advertisement in the paper looking for people who were involved in the bombing. And I rang Margaret, as I happened to be, and I spoke to Margaret, and she invited me to go into the meetings. So that's how I got involved. But since the legal team and Margaret Irwin got involved, they kind of kept it going over the years, and the families and the survivors.
Fergus, I want to bring you in at this point because you've made a film about this, and the fact that we are talking to Monica and Bernie and hearing their stories shows, I suppose, that these stories were forgotten. They did drift away from the public consciousness, but you are bringing it forward again. Why did you decide to tackle what is a really traumatic incident in our history?
Yeah, I suppose the story resonated with me because my dad should have been on South Leinster Street. I wasn't born, but in 1974. The only reason he wasn't there was because there was a bus strike that day, and they decided to work overtime. And so the story resonated with me. I knew the history of it. And the director of the film, Joe Lee, he was actually, he was a young teenager. He was playing football in Coolock and he heard the bombs. So I think we had, about 18 months ago, we'd finished the film 406 Days about the Debenham strike, which won the Best Irish Documentary last year. And we just approached, I knew the 50th anniversary was coming up, and we approached Margaret Irwin with the idea of doing a documentary, very much a human interest story, as you say, centering, you know, the survivors and the bereaved families. And also, I felt that we needed to also show that, you know, if 1972, the bombings in 1972 had been investigated properly, like the investigations were finished in seven weeks, then maybe the Dublin Monaghan bombings might not have happened. You know, there's been 29 ministers of justice, and they've basically told these people there's nothing to see here. You know, these people have been fighting for 50 years for, you know, for the truth and the injustice, and that's really what resonated with us. You know, that it's not only the British government that won't send across files or won't, you know, help these people, but it's also the Irish government that are at fault here. And I think, you know, what myself and Joe wanted to do with the film was really to show, you know, what these people have had to endure for 50 years, you know, and what they had to endure that day, and the ripple effect that it has on families,
of course,
you know, on children, these people's children, on these people's grandchildren, you know.
Yeah, I know. You know, you raised your two children. They never got to know their dad. Dad never got to know their child or grandchildren.
No.
So it's a constant reminder.
Yeah. I mean, Tom has never seen the face of his dad. You know, that's my son. Tom has never seen the face of his dad. And yeah, I think, like, Tommy was a brother. He was a son. He was a husband. He was you know, he would have been a granddad.
Irreplaceable.
You know, all those things were taken from him. You know, at 23 years of age. You know?
And nobody held to account for it.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Where can you see the documentary, Fergus? We are out of time. I just want to...
So I suppose we premiered the film in the Lighthouse Cinema on Friday night. There was 400 people there, 2 screens sold out. And then the film is on the IFI on Thursday night at 6:30. We're in the Nerve Centre in Derry on Friday night, 17th of May at 7:30. And then we go to Monaghan Town, 24th. And then we've agreed that with Justice for the Forgotten, and then hopefully the film will go nationwide. OK,
Fergus, Bernie and Monica, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for telling us your stories. The film, as Fergus just said, is being screened in the IFI Cinema on Thursday, the 16th of May, Derry Nerve Centre on May 17th, and at the Garage Theatre in Monaghan Town as well.
Lots more still to come on Ireland AM. We'll see you after the break.
Baltic you're at, and you've heard of cronuts and maybe even cruffins. But a new TikTok trend has finally introduced the world to the crookie.
The half cookie, half croissant has blown up online, especially across TikTok. So we thought we had to give it a go with some help from our baker, Karina Camerino from the Camerino Cafe and Bakery. You are so welcome. Explain this to me again. What is it?
Well, a crookie is a croissant stuffed with cookie dough and then baked again. So it's a twice-baked croissant. Think almond croissant, but instead of that lovely gooey almond filling, you have chocolate chip cookie dough inside.
It sounds very heavy, doesn't it? It sounds...
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. You got your buttery flakiness of the croissant. You have gooey. Now, this I would recommend eating it warm. So you have a gooey chocolate chip cookie center.
Yeah, because otherwise you'd have two contrasting textures, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
My mouth is watering already.
Okay.
Warm and gooey. You also have the salty sweet thing going on here too.
Of course.
So my chocolate chip cookies are always seasoned with salt, which happens to work really nicely with croissant.
Okay. So how do we make these, Karina? You start with...
It's actually super simple to make. So you use croissants that are stale, so from the day before. So you can either buy your croissant or you can get like croissant dough in the fridge or freezer section of your grocery store and bake them off. You do this the next day. I'm going to make some cookie dough as well, which is you can get cookie dough from the grocery store in the chiller section, or we're going to make some really basic chocolate chip cookie dough. So I have butter, Irish salted butter here that's soft, and I have castor sugar, 150 grams. I'm going to add 150 grams of soft brown sugar. I use soft brown sugar so that my cookie stays chewy. I don't want a crispy cookie inside.
No.
I want a chewy cookie inside.
Yes, okay.
So I'm just going to whisk that up.
Now, we were talking about this because we were like, this is like a French monstrosity.
Yes.
But it was actually...
created.
Yes.
It has real American vibes. It's super-sized croissant.
No
but
offense, America, but yes, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're proud of that part of American culture. So I'm Canadian, for the record. But yes, it was a French bakery that invented this, and they have those queues out the door, people queuing for this crookie. But the recipe is actually so simple to make, I was thinking, like, surely we could do even better. So it's like, what other mashups could we do? We could do a crownie with, like, brownie batter inside. We could, I mean, there's no end.
There is no end.
I'm going to add my vanilla extract here and 1 egg.
Okay.
So you've got butter, sugar, vanilla extract, and an egg.
So far, I have exactly that. I'm just going to blend it up till it's mixed.
I don't know. I think it's gone a bit mad now. I think it's gone too far.
But could you imagine if it was cookie with like fruit in it, like we'll say like cherries or something like that? You know, like soft fruit. That could be really nice.
That could be nice. You could invent the next viral thing.
You're onto something, Gra. You're onto something.
Tanya.
I have flour and baking soda here. I always put it through a sieve, and then I'm just going to add it here.
I suppose it is kind of simple because you're just making. You only have to make the cookie dough.
If you want to even make the cookie dough,
yeah,
you can make the crookie without even making the cookie dough. Crookie, it's hard to say.
It is a bit. We're tripping over our words here.
I mix that up.
And do you sell these in your bakery? Have they reached your bakery yet?
Today we will, because I've been testing the crookie, and we don't do waste. So whatever's not enjoyed here today, I'll be bringing with me to the bakery.
Bold of you to assume there'll be any left after
exactly.
this studio gets its hand on them, Karina.
We are a very sustainable lot here. We don't believe in waste ourselves.
No.
So I think you'll be going home a lot lighter than you've come in.
I imagine so. Yeah, I will go home a lot heavier.
I have my chocolate chips here, which are kind of chunks, actually, until it's all mixed together. So...
But that's quite a dry mixture, isn't it? It's not wet or...
Well, if I keep mixing, I might just go in with my hands. Don't be afraid to go in with your hands. And once it's all together, it's going to look more like this.
These little balls that you've made, okay.
These little balls. So I make them little balls so that they're easier to handle. So the cookie dough, if I were to keep mixing, it would turn out like this. So now I'm going to move right on to the crookie stage.
Yes.
So I take my baked croissant. I want it to be from the day before because it can't be too smushy. It'll be too difficult to handle like that. So I'm going to slice it in half, and inside you can put some chocolate chips if you'd like for some extra meltedness.
Okay.
And then we smush up some cookie dough.
Can you imagine kids all over Ireland watching this now,
yes,
going, "Mommy,
We've got some cookie inside. We're going to take it one step further. We're going to put cookie on top.
Oh, wow. We're creating some crookie monsters, aren't we?
Some crookie monsters. And you bake it like that in an oven. So it's in kind of a light oven, so 160 degrees for about 12 minutes, just to get that cookie dough baked and a bit soft.
Okay.
So I have some in the oven here. Nice and warm for you to try.
Oh, this is what we were waiting for, wasn't it, Gráinne?
Absolutely.
Look at that.
All right, I'm going to put them on.
So can I ask? So this is. I think they've ruined. Well, not ruined, but they've changed a French classic. What would be the Irish version of this?
A crone.
A crone.
Oh, yes.
A croissant
with
and a
a scone inside.
Yeah.
Okay. Or you could put a cookie in a scone.
Yes.
Oh, that's not.
Or
No.
boxed
No,
stuff with brown bread. or vice versa.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's go for it.
Okay. So it's the French, like, you know the way they're so protective over their culture? But it's the French themselves who have been inventing these things.
I thought they'd be protesting this.
Agreed. But they're into this hybrid sort of bakery.
They are.
Confectionery.
The Cruffin. Is it gooey? So I did a lot of homework on this, right? So I had to look it up on TikTok. And all the videos at the end, they're like, ooh. Oh, and then they're like, and then you have to take a big bite. Here's the inside. It's nice and molten. You want to have it hot because you want the cookie dough soft and you want the chocolate to be melted. Like a nice warm pain au chocolat.
You know what? You're right. The little bit of saltedness from the cookie dough makes it.
Oh my goodness. It's actually a lot nicer than, like, obviously I knew it was going to be nice and sweet, but it's
much
nicer.
nicer
It
than I
is.
thought.
It is. It's the texture of the two of them together.
Is it
actually...
the amount of butter in the croissant as well?
I mean, there is a lot of butter in a croissant, and there's a lot of butter in a cookie, but I think this is better than the sum of its parts.
Agreed. I agree. It's
It's
a
in its own time.
It's a taste sensation.
I'm going to have to finish it to really see what I think of it, so I'm
Would
going
you
to
dunk
need
it
a minute.
in milk or would you dunk it in your cafe au lait? I don't know.
I dunk it in my coffee all day long. Absolutely. Karina, thank you so much for introducing us to this new creation.
Amazing, Karina. Will you
Full recipe details are up on our website. You can find more from Karina at the Irish Museum of Modern Art in Kilmainham and at Camarino Bakery on Instagram.
Fair play to you. Coming up, the boss is back in town. We're talking to Bruce Springsteen superfans next.
Thanks for staying with us, and there are no crookies left. Thanks.
No, I left no crumbs.
Unless you've been living under a rock, you will have heard that the great Bruce Springsteen is once again on tour in Ireland.
Yeah, playing to over 250,000 people over 2 weeks in Belfast, Cork, Dublin and tonight Kilkenny. It's proof once again of the extraordinary bond between the boss and his fans in this country.
And on the way down to Nolan Park, the Irish Bruce superfans, Anton Martin, Tom McCormick, they've popped in. And all the way from Florida, they've brought Michael Collins, who used to work security for the great man back in the 70s. Good to see you.
Great to see you, Mark.
Suitably dressed as well, Tom.
Well, it's going to be a long day, a sunny day, but it's
you're showing off.
Oh, yeah. I'm just showing a wee bit.
Michael's got his Kilkenny GAA hat on as well. So, yeah, suitably attired for Kilkenny tonight.
I should have bought a loud one.
You should.
Loud and proud.
You should.
Would you get to see the game before you go down?
No, I'd be a black hat. Like, you know, if I went to see a Gaelic match, I think I'd be thrown out of Croke Park. I'm a soccer head, unfortunately.
All right, fair enough. OK. Anton, tell us this love of Bruce Springsteen. When did it start, and how many times have you seen them?
Well, I've seen him 58 times.
Whoa.
I've got five shows this year. I missed Belfast, as I said, because my sister-in-law got
Shame
married.
on you.
I know.
How dare she?
Yeah.
How did you miss Belfast?
Well, she was getting married in Northern Ireland as well, so I was trying to get down, but I don't think it wouldn't work. So anyhow, 5 shows this year, 8 shows last year. We went to New York and Washington and Gothenburg and Munich. And come here, I'm only a novice. I have a friend who's going for, I think it's 78 times.
OK.
Goodness. You're only a novice at 58.
Yeah. I'm only practicing it.
OK. And so you travel to see him. You go outside of Ireland to see him as well. Really?
Yeah.
Any shows abroad this year?
Yeah, we're going to Milan, and we're going to actually Wembley.
Wembley.
But we went to see him in Verona and Milan before, Stockholm, Gothenburg, Mannheim, Arnhem.
So you get to see the world because of Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, and my wife comes along as well. She loves it.
Does she?
Thank God for
yeah,
that.
I know, luckily.
She's no choice, really.
Tom, you've got your Bruce T-shirt on right now, but when did you see Bruce for the first time?
Slane in 85, 1st of June, that sunny day when anything from 65 to 100,000 people flooded the banks of the Meath countryside. It was just fantastic. You know?
But isn't that the gig, Tom, that Bruce said when he walked on stage? He actually went, oh,
well,
there
it was
were so many people.
First major outdoor concert, and Peter Aiken, the current promoter, his dad Jim brought him over, and it was a big risk for everybody. And Bruce took a break at halfway through the show in those days after 2 hours, and he was worried that to go back out again because obviously the Irish like their beers and maybe not enough water, and things were getting a bit rowdy up front. There's no pit as there is now. These are the pit passes, so it's all regulated and controlled that the diehards get to that much closer and things like that.
But he was so impressed with Slane that when they did a video for Born to Run, they did a live video for Born to Run, and Slane was all over it. So it stays with him.
Yeah.
He's got a great association with that.
Well, this will bring up his 35th concert when he leaves here. You know, next weekend in Croke Park. He's played Ireland 35 times, as you say, with 1 million fans over those from 1985 up to the current time. And he's been over most of the time with the E Street Band, sometimes solo in the Point as it was, and he never fails to rock us into the ground as he quotes from the stage.
There's definitely a connection.
Prepare to have your feet sore, your mind expanded and your organs stimulated. And that's what, and it happens every single night, and no 2 nights are the same. This is what we have difficulty telling our partners, it's the same show. No, it's not the same show.
Yeah.
60% would be the same set list, and then he's now taking sign requests and things like that.
Wow.
Gives guitar picks to the kids and the harmonicas to birthday people and stuff. So fan engagement is just fantastic, and the Irish just absolutely love
him,
it.
don't they?
Absolutely.
Michael, I'll come to you because you actually worked with Bruce, Fado, way back when.
Yes, at the beginning I did. By the way, you asked them, or the first show they ever saw.
Oh, yes.
Go on.
To tell you how long ago it was.
Go on.
They were an opening act.
Wow.
For Chicago. The band Chicago.
The band, yeah.
Peter Cetera.
So that was my first show, and they only played 45 minutes. It was hard to draw a conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he came back to the University of Notre Dame for a full show, 79, I think 79. He came out, played the song Badlands right out of the chute, and I was hooked right there. And I started I got to go to more shows. So Kilkenny is, ready for this, number 106.
Whoa! So you've travelled the world as well, obviously.
I know a couple of people back home that don't know the number they've been to.
Oh, my goodness.
It's in the 300s.
Yeah. I met someone over.
They saw him in Australia. I don't know where they get the money. I think this one guy just maxes out credit cards,
there's Ted Bryce from New Jersey was over on 300 last year. So sending our best wishes to him. He's not with us this year, but best wishes to Ted and all the E Street Nation that are watching in today.
This is my 7th show in Ireland.
7th in Ireland. Goodness. And so what is it about Bruce Springsteen in Ireland, do you think? Like, what's the connection? Why is the engagement so high there?
I think the fact that he sort of says he's Irish as well, and he's got probably the Irish attitude. Yeah, we're all out for a bit of fun.
And you've actually met him before, haven't you?
I met him a few times, I met him back, I think it was 92, 93. He actually sang Pony Boy to my son at Dublin Airport. Wow. So, I don't think many people have got Pony Boy. It wouldn't be the first choice now, but it was a good song. Yeah. And then I met him over in Asbury Park. We went to the convention centre. It's a long story, but we ended up going backstage. Terry McGovern got his tickets, and we ended up backstage, through Governor Pataki. We got backstage. It was good crack.
You guys know each other because there's a group called Bruce Buddies, and you really are buddies.
We are, yeah. We run the pit queues, as they're called, which is really an assembly of fans at 3 or 4 days, maybe longer before a show. You get your number in a list, and you don't queue for the 3 or 4 days. You come back for 3 daily roll calls at 10, 2 and 7. So we're at 500 at the moment in Kilkenny, another one at 2 o'clock, and then you stay, and then you walked in order, procession style. And we're so lucky in Ireland to have Niall, Kieran and Pat from Aiken Promotions. They have looked after us so well for so long, and we're literally processed down to the rail. People file along in order, and after the first 4 rows, it doesn't make that much difference. So the numbers usually close off at 1,000, and then the unnumbered fans can fill in behind, but the first 4 rows are kind of sacrosanct. It's run by the fans, for the fans, and you've been with these guys, and for the previous 3 or 4 days, they know more about you than your family.
Yeah.
And they are bosom buddies. Mike's a house guest. Last year we'd a camper van in the drive. It was just for the 3 days in the RDS, and different people. Anya Carville ran Belfast. A Norwegian, Asa, is running Kilkenny. Antoinette will run Cork, and Dublin will sort out tomorrow.
The fans actually come from all over the world.
Yeah.
The Italians and the Swedes and who else?
A lot of Australians last year.
Really?
Out of our top 20, we had 11 Australians.
And Michael, what brings you back to Ireland to come back and see him in Ireland?
Tom. No. My family's here. I have some family in Kilkenny, even though my family original home is in Listowel in County Kerry.
Okay.
And it's a cattle farm and has been, and it's still owned by the Collinses.
Well, with a name like Michael Collins. Come on.
Yeah.
That kind of show you something, a quick funny story?
Yeah.
So
okay.
I checked in at the airport a couple of trips ago and opened up the passport, and the guy looks at it and says, Michael Collins. He says, hi, I'm Abraham Lincoln. And I said to him, and we both got shot and killed.
Goodness. I just think it's wonderful. The camaraderie is obviously all share. I really hope you have the best time at the concerts this week.
And Charlie the chef has to be mentioned as well.
Oh, he
He was here yesterday.
Don't worry, he gave us the full lowdown yesterday, didn't he?
I think he's in Kilkenny already.
He was on the rail in Belfast. Yeah, he's a great character. So this is the camaraderie that's there.
And look, enjoy the concerts and all the concerts
to the point where Bruce knows them all by name.
I'd say so. We would probably call them out tonight.
He's following me. I'm just saying, Bruce, will you stay? Will you
give it a rest, Bruce? Come on.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning, guys.
Great to see you, boys. Have a great week.
Thank you very much. Will do.
Thank you.
Still to come, we chat to ex-prisoner Ger Redmond on how sport turned his life around for the better.
Plus, as Lady Whistledown cordially invites us back for more of the spiciest period drama this side of Downton, we'll be discussing Bridgerton as part of our telly preview. Stay with us.
Yes, hello again. It's who took that? It's
Very nice.
It is almost 11, so settle in for the last hour of Sunday's Ireland AM. Hands off my crookies.
You know what? You can see where the priorities are on this show, can't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's a dig. Still to come this morning, from ex-prisoner to pro triathlete, we hear Ger Redmond's remarkable tale of hope and sporting redemption.
And move over St. Patrick, your work is done.
Oh.
Yes, the High Street is full of our national colour this summer. We're taking a deep dive at the catwalk and going green a little bit later.
And as Lady Whistledown cordially invites us back for some more ballroom politics and smouldering sexy dukes, we'll be discussing Bridgerton and everything else coming to screens next week.
I love Bridgerton.
Will you be watching?
Oh, dearest reader.
Oh,
I love it.
I haven't seen a minute of it.
Stop.
You need to.
Not a minute.
You need
Nicola
to watch
Coughlan. And she's the starring. She's the woman this time.
She is.
She is.
She did tell us when the first Bridgerton series was released that she was going to tell her mother that when episode 5 came up that she was going to tell her mother that Netflix was broken.
Yeah.
Yes, do not watch Bridgerton with your parents. That's all I'll say.
They have Netflix in Galway too.
You need to be chilled to handle Irish weather. That's why Chill sponsor weather updates on Virgin Media One.
This afternoon, we can expect any patches of mist or fog to clear early, leaving just sunny skies and a few scattered showers across the country, with temperatures running from 14 to 19 degrees. This evening, we'll see heavy downpours and even thunderstorms developing in some areas, with a chance for spot flooding in places. Temperatures will range between 13 and 19 degrees. And tonight, we'll see persistent rain in the southwest through to midnight, before extending north over much of Munster, Connacht and South Leinster. Temperatures are expected to range from 11 to 12 degrees.
You need to be chilled to handle Irish weather. That's why Chill sponsor weather updates on Virgin Media One.
Time now for your final check on the morning papers on Ireland AM, starting with the Sunday Independent, which leads with the headline, Migrant Welfare Review as Harris vows to get firm. The paper reports that a major review of welfare supports and housing entitlements offered to asylum seekers is being undertaken by the government.
Front page of the Business Post leads with up to 80,000 new homes a year needed between now and 2050. The paper writes that the Housing Commission has warned Housing Minister Darragh O'Brien of this figure after just over 32,000 new homes were built in the state last year.
The Sunday Times leads with the headline, Critical Risks in Public Health warns top medic. The paper writes that the state's Chief Medical Officer, Breda Smith, had privately warned the government that her office was, quote, functioning at high risks 3 months before she resigned in an email last November.
Onto the tabloids, and the Irish Mail on Sunday leads with RTE invoices lost in move worth €400,000. The paper states that RTE could not produce invoices for €400,000 of transactions from when key executives who refused to cooperate with the controversial Barter account probe were in charge.
Over to the Sunday World, which goes with the headline, Kinahan link to Josh hit rifle. The paper reports that a gangland thug suspected in an accidental shooting may have acquired the murder weapon through criminal associates of the Kinahan cartel.
The front page of The Sun on Sunday writes, Stalker Stokes free. The paper writes that former Irish striker Anthony Stokes has been released from prison on a stalking rap just halfway through his 5-month sentence.
And finally, the Sunday Mirror reads, Bambi's Euro heartache. The paper writes that Bambi Thug fell short of winning the Eurovision Song Contest for Ireland last night, coming in 6th place with 278 points, which is Ireland's best result in 24 years.
Now, guys, we are a nation of tea and coffee drinkers, and a new survey has been took place in America looking at personalities based on if you're a tea or a coffee drinker. So first of all, what are you?
I'd be a coffee.
OK, you're tea and you're coffee. Yeah. Excellent. So I have one of each here. OK. Tea drinkers, according to this poll, you are more likely to wake up early.
Go on.
You prefer outdoor activities.
Keep going.
You're an ambivert, which is a balance of an introvert and extrovert.
OK.
And you describe yourself as adventurous.
Ooh.
1 out of 4.
1 out of 4.
Which one? The adventurous one?
No, the middle, the introvert,
ambivert.
extrovert.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right, OK.
I hate getting up early.
OK.
Oh, what time?
Oh, well, that's wonderful for the job you're in, isn't it?
I know. When the weekend comes, oh, jeez.
Coffee drinkers.
Yes.
More than half of coffee drinkers prefer to sleep in later.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yes. Prefer indoor activities like watching movies.
I'll never say no to a good movie.
And more likely to be introverted.
Yeah.
It's often been said about you, really, isn't it? She's quiet.
You can't get a word out of her.
I am actually quite introverted. I'm an introverted extrovert, maybe.
OK. All right.
I'm an ambivert.
Like an ambivert.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So there are differences between tea and coffee drinkers, but both enjoy mostly being their own baristas, making their own. So do you enjoy making your own or having it made for you?
Yeah.
I do like, because tea in particular.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's easier to get tea wrong than it is to get coffee wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what about you? Do you like your latte?
Well, I just drink black coffee, an Americano. So it's easy to get it right for me, but I will not drink bad. Life is too short to drink black coffee.
Bad coffee.
Bad coffee.
Bad coffee, I meant. I ruined that one, didn't I?
And I'm sorry, this is the thing. Coffee drinkers were also found to take slightly less time making their drinks. This is the one that kind of blew my mind. The average coffee drinker, how long does it take them to make a cup of coffee?
To boil the kettle, put the grounds in the thing, and I use a French press at home.
Of course you do. So, how many minutes on average for coffee?
It's about 3 minutes, I guess.
Okay,
all up.
The average was 4 minutes to make a cup of coffee. Now, tea drinkers, average.
I'd say maybe just short of a minute.
Now, this is ridiculous. minutes.
What? Oh, no, sorry. I didn't include the kettle boiling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
5 minutes, though. I'm supposed to let it steep and...
Are you going to berries or lines?
Oh, it has to, it has to be berries.
Yeah, and then this one is just the last thing. While tea drinkers spend more time preparing their beverage, they spend less time getting ready, which I think is appropriate here.
Wow.
Just in terms of how much time we spend in our...
Shots fired,
Okay,
Shiva,
sorry, I did not
Ivarovich.
mean for that to be an insult.
Yeah.
You look beautiful.
What?
You do look
Is
beautiful.
HR open on Sunday?
I don't know. Well, let's
Should we
find
check?
out. Yeah, yeah.
We-
I'm going to start quietly quitting now in a minute.
Oh, wow. OK. All right. 089 611 are you a tea drinker or a coffee drinker? And what Shiva's just described, is that you? Let us
Yeah,
know,
are you
'cause
shy
we're
like
not.
me?
Up next, we meet the ex-prisoner who turned his life around through the power of sport. He'll be chatting to us after this break. Welcome back. Our next guest, a native of Dublin's Darndale, got involved in gangland criminality in his younger years, which resulted in a 2-year prison sentence.
Fast forward 8 years, and now he's a professional triathlete helping young offenders and bringing his community together through sport. Ger Edmund, you are so welcome. We will get to what you're doing now, but take us back to the start of the journey. Take us back to Darndale, and I suppose getting in trouble as a young fella.
Yes, like I suppose if you go back to my young years, I would have been brought up in a deprived area, which ends up like that forms or transfers who you are then as an adult, you know. But I grew up in a home, I suppose. My mother and father would have their own issues and their own traumatic experience from their previous life, which transferred to us then. So the house would have been cold, you know. My memories going back would have been a cold home, no heating, no dinners, a lot of chaos within the home, you know. So that would be my memories. Can't remember many Christmases being good, if any at all, to be honest with you.
So then the people outside of the home become very important to you then, don't they? Your peers, the kids around the place.
Yeah, so like I found through sport then, I found that was a family and an outlet for me away from the home. So it was like an escapism. So I found that was something that I fell in love with fairly quick. I became really good at soccer.
Yeah.
Really good to the point where I actually ended up getting trials for a team in Scotland called Dunfermline. That was at about the age of 15. So, but like through growing up down there, all I seen was crime. You know, you just become a product of your own environment. You know, because what you see is what you do.
Yeah.
And there was a history of it in your family too.
Yes, definitely a generation history of, you know, people going to prison, and I suppose when you think that's the norm, that becomes your norm, and you know it's far from normal. You know what I mean? But when you're within that environment and that's all you see, like that's all you know. You know.
Yeah. Like you said, the family environment wasn't good. The house was cold. There was very little food, and there was a history of criminality there as well. When and how did you fall into and get to the point where you were being taken to prison?
So I was on trials in Dunfermline and an incident had happened, and you know that brought me home then. I basically had no role models in my life. I wasn't getting the support I needed. That brought me home then, and you know, because I lost that dream was taken from me by a bad generation, let's say, from the actions of my mother and father, and that basically took my dream away from me to become a professional footballer. And let's not forget the environment I grew up in. It was so difficult to get a trial and to follow your dreams at that stage, and for me to make that.
Yeah, so to get that trial with Dunfermline at the age of 15 was a humongous and remarkable achievement in itself.
Yeah.
And then it was gone.
And then it was taken from beneath my feet, and that sent me into a big depression. Like I didn't know how to deal with them emotions. It sent me down the wrong road in life. You know, I inevitably then took drugs and drink as a tool, as a coping mechanism. That became my coping mechanism. Then I obviously joined the gang as well. That was just funding my habit, if you like. And I felt then part of a family with the gang as well, you know, which is sad to say, but look, as I said, if that's all you know at the time, that's where you end up going.
You end up going to prison for a couple of years. So the environment in there, you could either just reach a point where the prison door is a revolving door and you just go out and you're back in again. So what was it that happened that made you decide, no, I'm leaving this life behind me and I'm changing things?
Yeah, so when I went to prison, that wasn't my mindset. My mindset was go back out. Actually, when I went to prison and got convicted, I said, that's it, I'm done. No one's going to ever trust me, no one's going to give me a job. I'm done forever. Society's never going to accept me again. Now I got back out and going back to what I was doing, and that's where my head was at.
Okay.
Prison didn't change me in that sense. There was no services in prison. There is services, but just not enough services. Like at the minute, 42% of people can only get education in prison. So if 100 people want education, only 42 people can get education. It's the same with the services for psychology, for counselling and addiction services. 18-month waiting list. We're not growing with the population. How are you supposed to be reformed if you're only going in and out? Most of the people that go in there, probably 70%, are there for less than 18 months. So that's why it's a revolving door.
So they'll never see any improvement or any ability to reform because they're never going to access the services, is what you're saying.
And when you get a prison sentence, what's taken from you is your freedom. That's the whole punishment. Your freedom is gone, that's your punishment. But it's not the case. Prisoners are being punished. Like, you have a prisoner in there that needs services and isn't getting it, and they're fighting with people in there because they're not getting the service. Then they're being punished and put on 23-hour lockup. I mean, you wouldn't put a dog in the kennel for 23 hours. It's not fair, like, you know, it really isn't. And we get that the crimes they commit isn't right, and we don't condone that. But there is a way to treat people, and there's a way to, you know, put service in place so these people can get the help they need.
So, Ger, you went in, you didn't get the help you need, and you were at a bit of a crossroads where you could have come out and, as Martin said, gone on the revolving door, the conveyor belt of in and out. But something changed, and you didn't do that. What was that?
My son, my son Ross was born in October 2016, and I swore to change the generation. I swore that was it. I didn't look up to my father, and my father used to tell me to do something, I would say, he's doing. I don't like bullshitters, you know. I like straight people. I just don't like that attitude. You tell me they're doing something, I'm doing it. So
we're looking at your reason.
There's my son there. Yeah,
that's your reason.
Yeah, so there you go. So, like, you know, he's 7 now, and he's changed my life.
But a lot of men can hold a newborn and have that moment of this is going to be different. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to follow through, because you are now breaking habits of a lifetime, cycles of behaviour, ways of communicating with the world and interacting with the world. And you're doing it without any real help, Ger.
Yeah. Well, I suppose you just got to man up, you know. So there's some stage in your life you just got to man up and you got to become someone's hero. And no better hero to become for your son, is there? So, you know, that was my analogy around it. I was like, if I could just be his hero, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was going to do it.
Okay. And then this came up, triathlete.
Yeah. So, like, as I said, I was in the gang right up to 2016, and I was looking for a different outlet. I was looking for a way to change my life. And I met my friend Mick Akio, and he was a triathlon coach. He was doing triathlons, and I just fell into the right people at the right time. And you know, I went to watch him. I supported him, and I remember seeing older people doing, and that gave me the, geez, maybe I could do this, you know. So I took her up in 2017, and he coached me. And I done Maastricht then in August 2017, couldn't swim. I went down to the swimming pool.
Triathletes who can't swim.
But you know, it wasn't about the actual sport, it was about the journey and the change. And I needed a new tool, because when you go from, like, when you have trauma in your life, what I was doing was I was using drinking drugs as a tool and a cope mechanism. So when I transferred that, I still needed that cope mechanism, that tool. And then I took up the sport, and that just replaced it. And then I became really good at it because I needed it a lot, you know.
Yeah,
so,
really good at it. You got a pro licence.
Yeah, so like within 22 months I became a professional athlete.
Wow.
Yeah, but like, I know you say wow, right?
But that is incredible.
Yeah, well, like, yeah, it is decent enough, but there's a real cause to all this, and I do like to talk about this because I needed that as a medicine. I needed that to stem my trauma, and I can get out of hand at times, because my wife used to tell me, like, you're not present. Like, you were in a gang, you weren't present. Now you're training and you're still not present. So I still wasn't being a husband.
So you need to balance it.
You need to balance it, but you also need to find out the root cause of why you're doing it so much. So I started to think, this isn't right. And And then I started to get more help. But I did break my neck then. And doing triathlon, and I still done 2 races after that, so it's unsafe for me. So I said, right, this is not right. So I then started doing work on myself.
Okay.
And then the more work I done on myself with counselling, the less I needed at an extreme level.
Right.
So sport was controlling me.
Okay.
And now I control sport.
It turned into a bit of a drug. But you work with other young people now to help them find a new way as well, don't you? We really want to talk about that briefly.
I do, yeah. I work in Overstown Detention Centre out in Lusk. And yeah, I just bring them sport. So I'm trying to teach them a new tool. So when they get out there, they are equipped with new tools in life through sport. So I get them to vent a negative into a positive through sport. And I do a triathlon class out there at my own gym. And yeah, that's it. And I have a lived experience, you know, and I've been there and worn the T-shirt.
You've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when they come in, I have empathy around them, you know, because a lot of them in there, in my opinion, when they come in, they're lost. You don't know where to look, you know, and, you know, I can give them that little bit of a comfort and say, look, I've been there.
Yeah.
And I know how it feels.
And it's authentic.
And it's authentic.
They know it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You walk the walk.
You keep challenging yourself because whatever with the triathlete stuff, you've now moved on to something else which is even more intense.
Yeah. So yeah, I've took up ultra running recently, yeah. So I actually only done a race there 3 weeks ago. I'd never trained for it. Just, do you know what it was? My wife says to me, I have an itch and I need it scratched.
Yeah.
And that's living with trauma. And you probably live with that all the time. It's known how to...
but at least you see it.
You see it, yeah. I'm in control of it and I don't go to the negative. So I took up, I've done a last man standing, which is basically is what it is, 6.7k every hour. And
you need to do something
There's
before
something you
you
need
leave.
to do before you leave here. Otherwise, Sunday might not be such a good day.
Yeah, I won't get the dinner. So yeah, I'll have to say happy birthday to my wife, Pauline. So happy birthday, Pauline.
Just over there.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Pauline.
Well, this one here, they got Johnson Channel 1. That's it.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Pauline.
Yeah,
Pauline, he came in here and he said, there's one thing I need to do before I leave.
Has to happen before this ends.
Very important.
Jared, great to meet you.
Thanks very much.
Okay. For more information on the work Jared does, as well as his running club, because he runs a running club as well as doing his work at Overstown, head over to jaredredmond.com.
Up next, we're adding our national colour to our summer wardrobes. Catch us at the catwalk after this quick break.
Fáilte Ireland AM. Now, it's not St. Patrick's Day, but try telling that to the high street. Summer wardrobes will be full of our national colour this year as various shades of green take over.
Yes, indeed. And joining us to showcase not quite 50 Shades of Green is stylist Shirley Lane. Shirley, I love green personally, so I'm delighted with this. Are we going to see a huge amount of it?
Huge amount. And you know what? I've always showcased really bright kind of greens and all of that. Today, I have one gorgeous lime green, but I'm actually going to showcase softer greens, nice khakis and stuff like that.
Olives, yes.
Which are so easy to wear. And olive green is in every store in the high street. I'm based in Blanchardstown Centre. Every store has khaki green.
Yes.
But it's lovely, and that olive green is really nice, especially if you have a bit of a tan. This I just adore.
Wow.
It's absolutely stunning. It's light, it's floaty, it's the most beautiful material. And this is diesel. So again, with diesel, you might associate your jeans and stuff like that in your more casual things.
And feminine,
It's stunning, absolutely stunning. And we have quite a big diesel, but this just caught my eye and I was like, wow. It's beautiful, and it has pockets, which we all adore. And you have these beautiful slits at the side.
Yes.
So when you're walking, if you're on holidays or whatever, you just feel glaminate, you feel the breeze. It's absolutely fabulous. And a really good range of sizes, but look at the price. Under €60, you have a showstopper. Again, if you're watching budget, this could take you to a wedding, an occasion, right? And that's what it's all about. Get your cost per wear. Don't kill yourself in terms of price point. This is fabulous. It's absolutely gorgeous.
And you've paired it with a beautiful bag.
So the Parfois bags at the minute are just stunning. And again, they look designer. You're paying $39.99. So again, super colour. It will match up with everything. So whether you're wearing jeans or trousers or workwear or whatever, a tan bag is perfect. Look
And I'm
at the
coveting
shoes.
those shoes.
Yes, aren't they fabulous?
Yes, they
so
are.
These are from Bershka, $29.99, and I love the ankle strap, but again, the mesh detail is beautiful. We're actually talking about the mesh detail. It's so comfortable because there's nothing pinching your toes.
Yes.
They're really breathable, but they're absolutely
here's
stunning.
the lime
So this is
green.
your pop of colour. Absolutely stunning. And I just gave it that extra darkness just to match it up. And look at the earrings, $9.99.
I love them.
Absolutely beautiful. Again, from Parfois. And again, if you're not familiar with Parfois, it's a full accessory store. It's like footwear. You have earrings, necklaces, bags, the works. Look at the dress. Absolutely beautiful. $59.95 from Zara. Only just arrived this week. Beautiful cut, gorgeous shade. And again, you could wear this with nude or white or whatever. I just love the black. I think it just gives that extra bit of luxury.
Yeah, it does.
Beautiful sandals. And again, coming back down to the bag, you have that little bit of sparkle within the bag, which is beautiful. But again, if you have a wedding or occasion or a night out or a reunion, whatever you have, this outfit is going to take you there.
It's so elegant as well.
It's so elegant, and it's the cut. You have the most beautiful seam down the centre of the body. It's beautiful. And these gorgeous sandals, which are absolutely stunning.
Yeah, I really like
Again,
them.
your whole outfit as a whole is so affordable, but you're still getting that extra wow factor, which I absolutely adore. But even just down to the earrings, just pulling the outfit together and feeling like it's finished, feeling like the outfit is complete, you know, and it's just how to pull it all together. I love this. So green is for the lads as well, and this is fab. It's just so soft, really timeless. This is from Tiffany Menswear, and again, you hear me harping on for years about Tiffany Menswear. It's just the cut, the quality, the tailoring. It's just timeless. It really is. You just buy once, have them for years and years and years. So your cost per wear is going to be amazing. But look, the blazer, and again, there's loads of guys out there with family occasions coming up.
Yes.
This blazer is fabulous. You can still double up with wearing this to the office with nice chinos. And again, you're getting that lovely soft green. And again, we're still sticking with the whole olive green in this kind of theme. But the shirt is beautiful.
I love this shirt.
Yeah, the shirt is gorgeous.
It's stunning. And even coming back to the quality of even trying to steam it, I barely had to touch it. So that shows the quality of the cotton.
That's what you want.
So it will travel forever, it will last forever. And then these beautiful chinos, which are absolutely gorgeous. I'm just teamed with a really nice, more of a summer loafer, which is lovely. And again, these are very easy to team with trainers or even a little just a normal shoe for workwear, which would be perfect. These are gorgeous if you're heading away, and they're full leather as well, which is absolutely fabulous. But such a nice, easy look, really classy, really tapered in. But it's fab. All from Tiffany Menswear, which is gorgeous.
Oh, and another green again.
It's gorgeous.
Oh, this is really pretty.
This is fabulous. So the cut, look at the waistline.
Yes.
And what I love, especially because I love a little bit of a sleeve, I love that little kind of cap sleeve. We're going to start with the earrings. So these earrings have the coral going through it, you have the khaki green going through it. So it's just a multicoloured earring, which is fabulous. $7.99, again, just elevates the dress another little bit. And this dress is from Reiss.
Yes.
So Reiss are known for quality. It's an investment piece. This is the dress that you will take out every single summer for many years to come. But it's just one of those, you could throw a denim jacket over it. You could drape a little blazer over your shoulders. Just really nice easy to wear.
I love that shirring around the waistline to bring you in.
This is kind of in a lot of things at the moment, isn't it?
Fab. And you know what? You're not worried about knicker lines. You're just pure comfort.
Yes.
So when you put it on, you just can't wait to wear it again. Beautiful little tan bag, gorgeous sandals there from Penneys. But what a gorgeous, easy to wear look. If you're out and about at the weekend, and again, this dress could take you anywhere. It doesn't have to be, you could go for smart cash, you can go cash, you can do whatever you want, which is great. But the high street is just full. Like Blanchardstown Centre at the minute is just all new stock in every single store. But again, really affordable. Work with the budget you're happy with.
Yes.
And embrace that
Ready
green
for
tone,
summer.
which is
That's
lovely.
it. You said green, I said white and orange. Let's go.
Yeah.
Shirley, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much.
Now, after the break, will our own Nicola Coughlan be the diamond of Bridgerton's new season? We're discussing all in our telly preview next.
There are dangers beyond our village.
What a wonderful day! have a name. May. I know where they're taking your clan.
You chose a human over an ape.
This was a human place. It is not yours.
It is now, isn't it? The elders did not tell us everything about this world. Nor bend for your king. Never.
Yes, welcome back. It's all about the ball gowns, diamonds, and dashing young dukes. Anyway, doing what they do. And I'm talking about Ireland AM.
I thought you were talking about my wedding.
Well, that too. That too.
All the big things happening this summer. Bridgerton is back on screens next week, starring our own Nicola Coughlan. And so we've brought in our very own heartthrob, Cillian O'Sullivan, to tell us more of what to expect from the ton. So speaking of sexy dukes, Cillian, tell us what's happening in Bridgerton this season.
This is the best intro I've ever had on this show. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Confidence is
I've
through
been
the roof.
insulted all morning.
I know,
You're getting
you didn't even get to eat
complimented on
one
the
of
way
your, the croissant bickies.
Yeah.
Crookie.
Go on.
The crookies.
If you don't mind.
Anyway,
Bridgerton
is back, season 3. So look, this has been a huge success for Netflix, and each season they focus on a different member of the Bridgerton family. And this season, along with the Bridgerton element, we've got Nicola Coughlan is having her time to shine with this season around kind of her love interest, the will they, won't they. And it's just, if you look, I feel like, what am I trying to sell here? Everyone who knows the show, loves the show, and watches the show, nobody is sitting here at home going, Bridgerton, what's this? And learning about this for the first time. All you need to know is season 3 is back. They're splitting it across 2 parts. This is something Netflix has started doing. And the line Netflix have released is because they want to elongate the engagement with the storyline. But the reality is they found that people were just getting free 1 month trials, watching a series and then cancelling the trials.
Really?
So what they're doing is they're splitting the seasons now so that you can't just watch it on a 1 month free trial. You have to actually get the subscription. So the first 4 episodes of this season are dropping, and then the next 4 episodes are happening in June, around the 13th of June.
Okay.
Okay.
Because it has a cult following, because it's Penelope, which is Nicola Coughlan's character, and Colin, and they're known as Pollen online, and they have like a huge following. Everyone's rooting for Pollen this season.
Well, this is it. And it's one of the things, obviously, it's from the Shonda Rhimes mind. So it's that whole world. It's part of her Netflix deal, which is, been great for Netflix. And it has sprung off this whole other genre of this era of TV shows that are, it's like you can just see execs in ITV and execs in BBC being, we need a Bridgerton, and you're seeing it crop up. And that's the power of Netflix. When they have a show like this, they had the budget at the time to be able to just go out on a limb with a show like this, a period piece. They didn't know if there was going to be much of an appeal for it, but my God, there was, and there still is.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, she's also playing the dual role from the point of view that she is the person putting all the gossip together.
She is the one behind the gossip. So there's all that, and there's a lot to it in this season. I think that's why people are really looking forward to it. And Nicola's just been going from strength to strength to strength.
Love her.
And
Love her.
I won't give away too many spoilers, but James, the producer of the segment, had said he has seen. There is a scene in about episode 4 where, let's just say, you'll never be able to look at her the same again.
Oh, wow.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Go on, Nicola.
Dairy Girls repeats will never be the same.
Never be the same again.
All right, let's move on, because the Fortune Hotel is opening.
Yeah, so this is... Right. So imagine the TV show The Traitors.
Yeah.
And then imagine Deal or No Deal.
Yeah.
And they've put these things together.
Right.
So a number of couples go into this beautiful luxury hotel, and they're giving a briefcase each. And in the briefcase, in 8 of them, there is nothing. In one of them, there is an early departure card. And in the other one, there's £250,000. You need to use your skills of bluff to make sure that if you have the £250,000, you retain the £250,000 in your briefcase. And at the end of every episode, there's opportunities to swap the briefcases, and you might, if you have it, how are you going to play that? Do you play it as if you don't have it? And you go, you can swap mine if you want or whatever. And then, so there's all of that kind of... you know, how people are acting. And even down to, I saw in one of the previews, they were just introducing the characters and what their job is has such a part to play. One of the guys is a barrister. So you're like, now you're thinking, well, everything he's going to do is going to be so calculated because of the way he's going to approach this. And then there's people who, you know, their job descriptions might be a little bit more airy and fairy, but that could also just be a front for how they actually operate in the background. So you've got all these different elements of like these people trying to trick everyone else out, and it all comes down to who's going to walk away with £250,000.
So it's all psychological, really, isn't it?
But who's going to avoid the early checkout card?
That's the thing. If you're stuck with that in your
money.
briefcase, you need to get rid of it. But you can't be too desperate to get rid of your briefcase because then people are like, well, why does he want to get rid of the briefcase?
So
Then you
we
play
know
the
what's
whole...
in there, but the contestants don't. We know what's in the case.
Yes, but the other so when they're swapping, they don't know what they are or aren't swapping.
Love
It is just... There was a segment on 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown where it's Carrot in the Box. If you know about this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, check it out on YouTube. It's brilliant. And it is essentially that 5-minute segment, but they've made it into this whole show. And it's just this bluff. It's a constant game of bluff.
Oh, gosh.
And I love the idea behind this.
Yes. Now, I'd be terrible at it, but it sounds like amazing TV.
Okay.
Let's move on to a drama, The Gathering.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting gathering, or interesting drama. The perspective of it is great. It's a 6-part episode. And an incident occurs at an illegal rave. There is an assault happens. The next 6 episodes, it's not a whodunit, more so a why they done it. So each episode focuses on one main character and their story in and around this rave. And it kind of explores everyone's motive for maybe doing this act. So then at the end of every episode, you're like, well, okay, well, they could have done it because of X, Y, and Z. And then it all leads up to the final episode where we find out who is guilty. But it's just an interesting take in the way they've done it, as opposed to kind of, you know, leaving breadcrumbs all the way through and thinking, could it be this, could it be that? They focus on each person in each of the episodes and they really give those stories a chance to breathe and give you an opportunity to get into the understanding of, well, I could see how they might do it or where that could be coming from. And it's just, it's a good take on this kind of genre.
So suspects in each episode until we finally get there.
So that's Channel 4, Tuesday at 9 o'clock is the first episode.
OK, this has been in the news very much over the last while. The Stardust story.
Yep. So back in 1981, it was just a horrific story that has really just put such a bad mark on Irish history, and it's one that the families of the victims have been 43 years fighting for justice. This, you know, aside from it being, you know, a good watch, this documentary, it's an important watch as well.
Yeah.
And it's a 3-parter. And the first part focuses on the night and everything around it. The second part is the immediate aftermath of the incident, and then the Keane Tribunal and everything that come off the back of that. And then the third part is the kind of where we are today as a result of it. So the 3 parts of the series are you know, different and broke up in that kind of way in the timeline, essentially. But as I said, it's just one of those things that whether you watch it now or whether you watch this in 10 or 20 or 30 years, this is something that, you know, is for the archives, and it should be, a story like this should be told and needs to be told. So this is going to be one that, as I said, it's an important watch to watch if you can sit down and get to it.
DVRs.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. So that's, by the way, the first episode of that is tonight, 9:30 on RTE.
Okay. We got a movie to watch as well.
Yeah.
And you're not sure about this, are you?
No, I saw the name and I was like, If. If is an awful name for a movie.
It sounds like from the get-go that would be just squashed by a studio, but actually If stands for Imaginary Friend. Yeah. So this is from the brain of John Krasinski, who has, ever since shooting to fame on The Office, has really shown that he is an incredible director and writer as well. He's done The Quiet Place and the sequel to that. But this is very different to that. This isn't a thriller or horror or anything of the sort. This is a family-friendly movie starring Ryan Reynolds, which, by the way, I could watch him read the phone book for an hour and a half and be happy out. So this show is imaginary friends. When the kids grow up to the point where they don't need them or don't see them anymore, they're kind of banished to this land. And Ryan Reynolds is an adult who can still see the imaginary friends, and he teams up with this girl B, who can also see the imaginary friends. And the idea of the movie is that they want to try and like a dating service for these lost imaginary friends and re-find them or reconnect them with their children. And the beauty of a show like this, because all the imaginary friends are animated and they're all such characters, that John Krasinski could pull up his Rolodex and the names he has doing guest appearances on
He'd
this.
have those
from
connections,
Steve Carell,
absolutely.
Phoebe Waller-Bridges. This, like, you're going to recognise so many names, and it's just a fun family movie.
Sorry, Kate, out of time. Thank
Love
you
the
so
sound
much
of
for
it.
coming in and
Thanks,
chatting to us about that. Earlier on, we baked and I ate some crookies. Here's how we did it.
In a medium bowl, sift together the flour and baking soda, then beat your butter, brown sugar and caster sugar. Mix in your egg and vanilla, plus the chocolate chips to make your dough. Slice open the croissants 3/4 of the way through, then fill with chunks of cookie dough. Bake the filled croissants for 12 to 15 minutes, then decorate with icing sugar to serve. Deliberately put that bit in because I got none of it. I know what you're saying. I could do without. Yeah, I can already hear it. But
No,
none of it.
Not at all.
None of it.
No. In fact, you need a bit of conditioning.
Do I now? Well, it won't be done through a crookie because there were literally no crumbs.
No crumbs.
Anyway.
No crumbs. Let's
What's
move
going on
on to
tomorrow?
tomorrow. On Monday's Ireland AM, broadcaster and national treasure Mary Kennedy will be dropping by.
Derek is flexing his fins when he goes for a swim with a group of Irish mermaids.
Irish Army captain Elizabeth Carr on chasing her Olympic dreams ahead of Paris 2024.
All that plus the news, sport and weather you're waking up to on Monday's Ireland AM. It's live from 7 o'clock.
Fun.
Enjoy your Sunday.
We'll
Bye-bye.
get you a crookie. We'll get you one. We will.
If you turn up, we'll get you.